What's up, hackers? Welcome to Saturday Hacker Day. My name is Taggart, and today, as always on Saturdays, we're going to be tackling some blue team stuff. Very excited for this stream. You're going to be glad that you hung around for this one, especially if you are in a SOC, because we're continuing our series on all of the skills necessary to work in a SOC. Today, we're going to be talking about Sysmon and enhanced Windows event logging. But before we get there, a couple of stories from this week in cyber news that I thought merited a shout out. So let's start with that. Both of our stories this week involve more Microsoft vulnerabilities. So thank you very much, Microsoft, for keeping me employed. Very happy for that. Although you have to wonder, at what point does a reputation get impacted by all of this? So far, it's never. It's never. But cool to see that there's just a never-ending stream of 0 days from the most important software developer in the world. We're going to start off with the MS HTML madness known as CVE 2021-40444. This one's a doozy. Essentially, there is a vulnerability inside of mshtml.dll. So this is a library that Windows machines have used for years. Exactly right, Lasso. It is about ActiveX. So basically what's going on, and for those of you who are too young to remember, ActiveX was a multimedia framework that predates Flash, predates some more modern, it certainly predates HTML5. And it's it was a way that multimedia could be embedded in web documents, but it was specifically for Internet Explorer. Now, even though ActiveX and Internet Explorer itself have been deprecated for a little bit now, the DLL that allowed ActiveX controls to work was still present, and the code was still present in this DLL. And it turned out that there was a way to embed ActiveX controls inside of Office documents and have them still render to this day. And because there was I believe it was an overflow vulnerability, but the bottom line was that there was a remote code execution vulnerability inside this DLL. We had this kind of one shot to code execution attack against Windows systems. Now, here's why this gets so interesting. We're very familiar with macro type Office document attacks where there is a Visual Basic macro, malicious macro embedded in a document, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or even a PowerPoint presentation or a Word document. The thing is that they have some easier ways to get identified. For one thing, their file extension, generally speaking, is going to be different than a traditional document. Rather than docx, it'll be .docm, or if it's a template, .m, and then the macro will be inside there. Same thing for Excel. Instead of XLSX, it'll be XLSM. But these ActiveX controls can live inside regular run-of-the-mill documents without a different extension. So the first pass detection is already out the window. And then the way that this ActiveX control is embedded is a little bit harder to identify by signature. And so how is this mitigated? Well, it turns out it might be a little bit harder than we thought. The original guidance from Microsoft was to change some registry settings, which, as it turned out, was actually changing some of the same settings that you would change in Internet Explorer back in the day by changing your internet settings security level, basically to disable all ActiveX controls wherever they got rendered. But it turns out that that was bypassable. And so we still don't have an entire fix from Microsoft. We're so close to the Patch Tuesday security update date for this month that we're not sure yet whether Microsoft is going to release a patch in time. And as is usual for Microsoft, when one of these 0 days comes around, they have been exceedingly tight-lipped about the situation and whether they are in fact working on a patch. Now, I understand why there might be some business reasons to do that, but as a user and as a security analyst who's responsible for Microsoft products in an organization, I am troubled by radio silence. It makes me worry that they themselves do not yet know how to fix it. And that's what we have to assume. There have been some other researches into mitigations, but very much like the Petit Potem attack last month, God, that was only last month, it seems like what may happen is that there are going to be these incremental patches, and then the researchers are going to be one step ahead, looking for ways to bypass this. So this is definitely something to look for detections on. There are a few registry keys that you can detect on. All of the weaponized attacks we have seen with this particular vulnerability set command and control URLs and very specific registry keys. So as far as I've seen, that is the best detection against this attack, rather than trying to parse what's going on specifically in an Office document. It's a little bit after the horses have left the barn, but you're still going to be able to detect malicious activity once it's occurring on the endpoint. All right, the other story from Microsoft, this actually broke, I think, pretty late yesterday, was something from Azure. Once again, the Azure container instances have an escape vulnerability. This one is absolutely wild. So if you're not familiar, Microsoft Azure container instances essentially is a way to run containerized applications like in Docker in the Azure cloud. That's and managed by Azure. That's the whole deal. It turned out, though, as with all containers, we are hoping that the container is secured in such a way that code cannot escape the sandbox that the container creates. And remember that a container is essentially just a list of a combination of C groups and namespaces in Linux that allow isolation of processes, but that the kernel is shared amongst multiple containers on the host. And it turns out that in ACI, other customers' containers are shared on the same host. So if an escape is possible, you could actually gain entree into other customers' private information. And of course, the host itself. Really, really scary stuff. And it turned out that ACI was using a slightly older container runtime that had a vulnerability that allowed attackers to overwrite libc, which is the base C library that code written in C uses as kind of its primary linked library, essentially, where things like print and read file, all the basic stuff that you do in a C program is living in libc, and being able to overwrite it and then inject your own function definitions means that you can gain code execution on the host, because libc is shared amongst those containers. It's not resident within a single one. So container escape was possible. This was demonstrated. They are issuing a fix. They're updating that version of the container runtime. But once more, we see that you have to trust the developers of a cloud solution, and sometimes that trust can be misplaced. So just something to think about as you're considering container options. Oh dang, I'm just realizing that my slides are not updating. Oh well, hopefully that was all understandable. So today we are taking on Sysmon. Let me hop right over into the main screen here so that we don't have to worry about the unupdating slides. Yeah. So today we are taking on Sysmon. What is Sysmon? Well, we've been talking about Windows event logging for a little bit now, and one of the things that you'll often come across is that the default Windows event logs are somewhat limited in what they can show you. But the good news is there is another option. Inside the sysinternals suite, and we've played with sysinternals a little bit already, inside the sysinternals suite is a tool called Sysmon. Thank you very much, Mark and Tom. And what Sysmon allows us to do is enhance Windows event logging, computer enhance, by creating all of these new Windows events that are a little bit more readable and a little bit more interesting for the security analyst. Things that we would care about going on in a system, not just for security analysts, of course. System administrators can get great usage out of Sysmon, but specifically for the things that we would care about, looking at what happened on a system, Sysmon makes this information very, very easy to understand. So we'll go through the installation of Sysmon. We'll talk about these event IDs, but if you want to see how this works, you can go ahead and take a look at Sysmon right here from Microsoft. It's of course a free download. And that also blows me away, that it's a free download that is, I would say, one of the most fundamental foundational tools for proper detection of malicious activity on an endpoint and threat hunting on Windows. Without the logging provided by Sysmon, the threat hunting activity becomes much, much more difficult, because you're going to have to parse through really, really complex logs if the events are logged at all. There are some events that Sysmon has inside of it that don't get recorded by basically any other Windows event logging. So really, really important to get this on your system if you can. So we're going to go through the Try Hack Me room that's kind of an intro to Sysmon and see what they have to say about it. But I'm also going to be adding in a lot of my own personal flavor, including a way to analyze EVTX logs. It doesn't have to be Sysmon, but certainly Sysmon logs using Python. And I find this methodology a lot easier to do rather than kind of the Windows Event Viewer or PowerShell. OreoBite, good to see you. All right, let's kick this off. So we are in this Try Hack Me room. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat in case you guys want to play along. Alrighty, and hopefully this thing doesn't die after an hour. Sysmon config overview. Right. So one of the things we have to talk about is to install Sysmon on a system. You can do this via GPO or via SCCM, whatever you want to use to manage your endpoints. But importantly, Sysmon on installation creates a service, but it also takes a configuration file, which is XML. And the XML file looks like this. It is a set of inclusions and exclusions for all of the different Sysmon event types. And it allows you to filter specifically for things that you're probably not going to care about and make a whole lot of noise. So for example, here, I'm using Swift on Security's Sysmon config. It's one of the most popular ones. But essentially, we're taking, okay, process create, which is event ID 1 in Sysmon. And we are looking at all the exclusions for things that we don't necessarily care about. They're going to make a lot of noise, right? We're manager, DLL host, WMI. These things we're going to exclude because they are not necessarily suspicious and they're going to have a lot of process creations. Look at all these service hosts, right? We're going to ignore these. Infinite logins. Oh, hey, good to see you. Say you're in a SOC that has to manage 1,000 machines. Would you recommend you deploy Sysmon to all systems? Have you noticed any impact of doing that? Okay, great question. And this is a question that security people are going to get from administrators or system owners constantly, because security is going to say, hey, install this agent. And the system owners are going to be like, but performance, but impact. And it's a reasonable concern, especially with things like EDR, because EDR can go pretty aggro on a system and have performance impacts. Sysmon is pretty lightweight, all things considered. Let's talk about file size for a second. I actually just ran a test of this last week. So in a week of using Sysmon on my machine with pretty heavy usage, right? 8 hours of work every day, being pretty heavy in my usage, creating a lot of different processes, running a bunch of different things. A week's worth of Sysmon logging with this configuration created 64 megabytes worth of logs. So not so bad. And in terms of performance impact, I don't have any percentages, I don't have any quantitative data for you, but anecdotally, really, really not noticeable from an impact standpoint. I have not noticed it whatsoever. So it's really, really great to see that it's possible to get that running. And by the way, running alongside EDR. So often you'll have like EDR and antivirus not liking each other, or some other thing that's doing API hooking or DLL hooking, not like something else that's doing the same thing. In this case, Sysmon seems to be doing just fine. It really has been the most painless agent installation or service installation that I've seen. Now, the second part of that, though, is how do you get the logging off of that? And I think that's where you might see some performance impact, right? You have to set up Windows Event Forwarding properly if you're going to do it that way. or set up a syslog destination, which is something you can do with Sysmon. So you can set this up to forward, and alternatively, and this is what we're trying to do, we're trying to actually get our EDR solution to ingest it natively. But that's kind of like pretty hacky. But there are lots of ways that you can get the logs off the system. But I think that particular part of the process is where you're going to see the performance impact rather than the ongoing logging, which seems to be pretty lightweight. And then, of course, last thing, just to be as thorough as I can with your answer infinite logins, you have to think about your EPS, your events per second, on the destination, right? If you're sending this stuff to a SIM like Splunk or QRadar or whatever, this is going to make noise, right? So you have to think about, am I going to blow my EPS? Am I paying for hosted SIM services? And am I going to start paying for a lot more for my EPS? Things like that. Yeah, I mean, you have to do some testing and some math to see how it goes. But if you can afford the performance / cost impact of this thing, what you get, the value for money is absolutely, I think, unparalleled, especially for a free tool, because of the visibility it gets you onto the endpoint. And I'll continue going after this, but one other thing I want to point out is lots of EDR tools do some of what Sysmon does, right? They'll look for interesting process creations, like things that are children of, like weird children of weird parents or things like that. They'll look for interesting image loads or changes in file creation times. They'll look for those things. But here's the trick, especially for managed EDR solutions. You have to trust the detections that your service is providing. Different EDRs and different agents have different abilities for you to customize what it does. With Sysmon, you don't have to rely on a third party. You can, but you can also write your own detections. So if you wanted to do proper threat hunting, this is where it's at. Because you can say, okay, this is a brand new, take CVE 2021-40444, our ActiveX vulnerability. You can, before waiting or without having to wait for your EDR solution to have that detection ready to go, you can right away start looking for registry events from Sysmon logs if you have them. So it really ups your proactive threat hunting capability, which I don't think any other tool on Windows really has the same parallel value. Alrighty. So this is what the this is what the configuration file looks like, and you're going to have to set this up when you install it. Now, this is a good starting point, but I strongly recommend that if you are going to use Sysmon in your environment, even in a lab environment that you're testing on, try to make some changes to it so that you understand, one, how the changes are going to be made, but also you want to make some changes maybe after some research to understand what is noisy in your environment. So, and what don't you care about, right? What are the things that you know you can exclude? And that's going to, again, reduce your impact if you have a good config. So a lot of your performance is going to rely on a good configuration here. Lip79, thank you so much for the follow. All right, so we're going to get this thing installed, I think. All right, so this try-hack me room is going through every single file or syslog Sysmon event type, and we will go through them, but I don't want to do that just yet. I kind of want to get our hands dirty with this right away. Okay, so let's go ahead and log into our system. There's our IP. The user is THM Analyst. And the password is really, really complicated for some reason. How's everybody doing this weekend? Hopefully getting some rest and relaxation. All right, let's see what we have here. tools. What you got for me? Hey, Gingerroot. Working on some write-ups? Of course you are. Gingerroot's write-ups are amazing. I'm just chilling. I'm doing this. That's what I'm doing. And then I think I'm probably going to be working on the flare-on challenges. Oh, that's awesome. You're working on internal assessment? All right, so we have Sysmon right here. And then the configurations are here. Okay, so perfect. Now, is Sysmon running already? I don't know if they've set up Sysmon already. Let's find out. Oh, I think we're going to have to install it. Oh, finished a fairly big coding project at work, so it's okay to relax. Well, so, congratulations to you. I know that you've been working hard on a bunch of different projects, so I'm glad to hear that one of them at least is off your back. All right, so let's install Sysmon. Let's do it with the Swift on Security config file. To do that, let's open up an administrative PowerShell. You know, I've done a lot of stuff in IT, and I have to tell you, nothing feels... I think it's maybe a photo finish in terms of what feels greatest between finishing a software project and shipping it, and like popping a shell in real life on a real system. Kind of, they're two very, very different feelings. What, you know, the popping a shell, like compromising a system successfully, that's a thrill. But there's also like a little bit as a technical blue teamer or a purple teamer, there's also a little bit of a disappointment, like, oh man, now I have to deal with this. So it's cool to do it, but then it's like, oh, okay, this, I just created a whole lot of more work for our team. Whereas, you know, shipping a software project, it's a very wholesome, fulfilling, you know, sense of accomplishment. It's more of a slow burn, good feeling, I guess. All right, let's go to C, users, DHM analyst, desktop tools, Sysmon. Okay, so what we're going to do to install Sysmon, this is a 64-bit system, so I don't know why we wouldn't use the Sysmon 64. We're going to run sysmon64.exe. Plus, sometimes popping a shell is where the work starts. Post-exploit, absolutely, that's right. Post-exploitation can be super lengthy depending on objectives. Absolutely. Not to mention the fact that, you know, you're still writing the report, right? So we're going to run except EULA, which is a command line option to prevent Sysmon from popping up the EULA. Otherwise, it'll show us a window when we run it. And then we run it with the -I option. And then we have to give it a config file, which we know is in configurations, and swift.xml. Yep, perfect. Oh, it's already running. Okay, well, at any rate, we'll run Sysmon 64 with -C to run to update the configuration file. Yeah, so if it's already installed, you can update the configuration file just with the -C option. Perfect. Now, let's take a look at these Windows events, first in the event viewer, which is terrible, and then we'll look at it in PowerShell. Let this thing load up. We have some saved logs, that'll be interesting. Okay, so let's first look at the Windows logs, right? By default, what do we have? We have application security system. That's generally what you'd have on a Windows system. Security logs, we're going to have things like logons, elevation of privileges, things like that. May not be... Oh, wait a minute. Why can't I see anything? Because I did not open it as an administrator. Let's try that again. There we go. Stuff. 4672, special logons. 4624, right, logon. The huge. But then if we go over into application service logs, there's this whole other list of stuff. In particular, I want to show the PowerShell logs because... oh, sorry, not these PowerShell logs. Microsoft Windows. And then if we go down to PowerShell before we get to Sysmon, I just want to show you this. So we go to the operational PowerShell logs. Good. Here's a 4104, execute a remote command. You can see these, right? Get Win event. This is actually the creator of the box running Windows event stuff to get information. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of detail on this thing, right? Notice what we don't have. We don't have parent processes. We don't have much of anything at all. Consequently, the built-in PowerShell logs are not as helpful as they could be, especially when we're trying to do threat hunting. So now let's take a look at Sysmon instead. See the kind of logs we have in here. All right. There's quite a bit to see here. So we'll have our task categories. Event ID 1, which is going to be your most common, is a process creation. Now let's see the data that we have in a process creation. In general, we can see these. We have the file name, we have the command, the full command line. Super, super valuable, right? We can create all sorts of detections right off of this. We can also see our user, of course. It'll MD5. You can configure what hashes it does for you. By default, it'll do MD5. You can do SHA if you want to, although that will have a bigger performance impact. You can also see the parent image and the parent command line. This is where you can really start creating relationships between parent and child processes. So for example, if you see something like, I don't know, calc.exe, create an instance of cmd.exe or powershell.exe, that shouldn't happen. And so now you have a way to start creating those detections for known suspicious activity. Let's take a look at the reg value set. This is another really great one where we can just see right off the bat. We can see on the user's hive, we're looking right into this specific SID, what's going on. And so the target is whatever this exe file is. And does it show us what the value set was? Okay, it was set to binary data. You go see what that might be, but knowing what gets set here, that's really, really interesting. We also, of course, have DNS queries. Let's see if we have if there are any event ID 3s in here. Oh, perfect. So one of the ones that drives me crazy when I'm doing investigations on a Windows endpoint and I don't have Sysmon is looking at network data, because Windows event logs just suck at logging network connections. They just suck at it. But Sysmon makes it really, really easy. All of a sudden, you've got a network connection detected. And what do we get? We get source IP, source port, dest IP, dest port. It's exactly what you would want to see from this kind of logging. And so this really, really helps, especially if you're like, I don't know exactly... Vida, thank you so much for the follow. If you don't know exactly, what a bit of traffic originated from, this is a problem all the time. Is like, okay, we've got network artifacts of some suspicious activity from an endpoint. We need to correlate that with a specific process. on the machine once we are on the machine. How do you do that? Well, you could do netstat or some other things like that, but with Sysmon, all you have to do is take a look for this event ID 3, and sure enough, you're going to get the PID and the image to trace it right back. Very, very, very handy. So we've taken a look at event ID 1, we've taken a look at event ID 3. Let's see if there's something else fun on here. We've looked at 13 for reg value set. Let's filter, see if there's anything else cool. Let's see if there's an event ID 8. Maybe not. And by the way, what is event ID 8? Why would I care about that? It's one of, I think, that's the one I want. Yep. So event ID 8, create remote thread. We have some pros in chat. Anyone want to talk about why create remote thread would be super interesting? Oh, good. We do have some. That's really neat. So we have 2 create remote threads detected, where we have the source image was RDP clip, which is the remote desktop clipboard, and sending it to CSRSS, right, our session subsystem. Interesting. So this is a thing that Windows allows processes to do, and it's actually really, really unique to the Windows operating system. This is not a thing that happens really in, like, on purpose in the Linux side, and it's a huge part of how Windows is the way it is, and also how a lot of malicious activity works. So basically, Windows processes have this capability of grabbing handles onto other processes, and then being able to, with this Windows, this kernel API call, create remote thread, can create a new thread in that other process. And then, because this thread has its kind of own section of memory, which you can define as being writable with sufficient permissions, now you can send your shellcode or whatever you want into that thread. Now all of a sudden you've got this stuff that you want executing over in that other process. Really, really, really interesting. So that's one way that you're going to see a lot of malware do its work, is by creating remote threads in existing processes. So looking for suspicious patterns in these create remote threads, really, really important threat hunting strategy. Oh yeah, we're doing a try happy room. Maybe we should actually answer some questions. I guess we're kind of doing this already. I mean, we've talked a little bit about how to... so that's how things like Meterpreter migrate. Yeah, that is how things like Meterpreter migrate. Come on, autofocus. There we go. Yes, that is correct. So if you run migrate, like, and you give it a PID, that's exactly what's going to be happening, right? It'll kind of shuffle over its process into a thread in another PID. Exactly right. All right. Let's talk a little bit about how to get at these win events. Of course, we've seen it with we did win events last week, but let's do some more here. So if I do get win event, let's do it the easy way, right? The first would be log name. And the log name here would be Microsoft -Windows -Sysmon /operational. So it's dashes all the way down the folder tree, and then it's a slash for the log type, whether it's admin or operational. And then let's just do max events 10, just to see the last 10 events. Okay. So that's working out for us. Very good news. If I wanted to filter even more, I would have to start using something like a filter hash table. So for that, I would do filter hash table and create the hash table where we say log name equals same deal, Microsoft. I should just copy and paste this, huh? And then we could say ID. I think it's ID rather than event ID. I always forget this. I'm pretty sure it's, let's try event ID. Equals 1. Max events equals 10. So we're going to look at the last 10 process creations. I think it might be ID. No? Oh, the problem was max events. Can I give it just max events out here? Yes, I can. Okay. So that doesn't go into the hash table. All right, very good. And then if I wanted to get all of the information, I could save these to a variable. And then I could access, say, the 0th one. And if I want to get the whole thing, pipe it to format list. And now I see the whole smash. Here's the thing, though. Get when event is great. And if you're on a Windows system and you're working with this, it's awesome. But it's not the only way that you can or even should analyze Sysmon logs. Last week, we looked at Redline Collector, or we looked at Mandiant's Redline to look at Windows event logs in general, and you can definitely use it with Sysmon. I love using Redline with Sysmon logs because you get so much information in there. However, I am also playing with another way at looking at Sysmon logs that I think is worth exploring, and we'll try to get to that today using Python and the Jupyter Notebook system to analyze a full-out export of your event logs. And that's a little bit, what's nice about that is that it gives you a programmatic interface to parse through the logs and do actual statistical analysis on what's going on in the logs. You'll see why that's cool in a minute when we get to it. All right. Okay, so now we have some questions to answer. How many event ID 3s are in C users THM analyst desktop scenarios practice filtering EVTX? Okay, so we're gonna try this here. That's so many events. Coming back over to our shell here, we want to modify this slightly, because we're going to give it a path to the specific log file. And they wanted event ID 3, right? So we're going to save this to a variable too, because that's going to be bananas otherwise. Yes, event ID 3. And event ID 3 is network connections. Oh, come on. Do I have to put the path inside of the hash table? Filter hash table is a little bit funky about what it has to have inside the hash table and what it doesn't. Okay, that worked. I think. It's going to take a second to compile all of them, but it's definitely going through and getting the events. Now, does it provide... Not for this one, I don't think. For some of these, it provides... Oh, no, it does. It has the EVTX file. Cool. All right, we'll do that maybe for the next one. Still going. Hey, Feels, bro. I'm doing well. How about yourself? All right, while PowerShell is slicing through that, there may be a faster way to do it just because I know it's pre-saved already in here in the event viewer. So let's show you how to do that. We have saved logs. It was filtering was what it was called. Oh, and they don't actually have it in here. Well, I don't want to open it because it'll be crazy. Yeah, okay. Oof. How large is this thing? Scenarios. Let's take a look at scenarios. Investigations. Nope, practice. Filtering. So like 59 megs. Not... It's actually fine. I'll open that in the event viewer. Okay, we're going to filter the current log, hopefully, without crashing the machine. We're going to filter for event ID 3. And it tells us that the number of events is 74,970. Handy. Oh, do I need a comma in there? What? Oh, is that the total events? Oh, yes, it is. Number of events. I just can't read. 73,591. Much better. What is the UTC time created of the first network event? And once again, we ran into this last time. First is extremely vague in this context because do they mean first on the list? Or first chronologically, because they're in reverse chronological order. So I don't know what they want. We will try this UTC time here. No. Now, I like going to details and the XML view. There's our time created. Although I can't help but notice that that's not at all the format that they're looking at there. So let's go and see if they mean the first one. Like first one. I'm gonna resort this. Just curious, did the PowerShell ever finish? Nope. These Try Hack Me boxes. Not the most powerful. We'll let this keep sorting and see if we can move forward here. All right, so for the Metasploit one, I'm going to download this EVTX. Verhaken Live, yes. Or, yeah. We are. And in fact, all of the videos are cross-streamed to YouTube. All right, we're gonna download these evtx files. Documents, try hack me, Sysmon. Cool. And I am going to set up my Jupyter Lab situation so you can kind of see how we would do this with Python, because I think it's going to be a cool exercise. And in case you haven't gotten this already from my constant harping on it, no. If you are an analyst in a SOC, learn yourself some Python. Hey, the Philly 79, thank you so much for the YouTube subscription. Okay, so what are we looking at here? We're trying to get the date for this thing. This is the 1st. I think this is the time that they want. Let's see if we can actually get that going. Oh, great. So they actually did mean 1st in that case, not 1st sorted reverse. All right, so for this one here, we're going to set up Jupyter Lab. Now, let's talk for a minute about Jupyter and why I think it's so freaking cool. And I'm probably going to do like a full talk or at least a full stream on this at some point using Jupyter. And yeah, this is something I would do at a conference. Threat hunting with Jupyter, because I actually think it's super important to know. But I think it's Project Jupyter is the site. Let's find out. It's the name of the site, but it is Jupyter with a y.org. So what is Jupyter? Broadly speaking, it is a way to intermix human writing and code into a single document that is executable. It's a really, really beautiful concept that takes a lot of cues from Donald Knuth, the guy who wrote literally the book, The Art of Computer Programming. And one of his ideas was something called literate programming, where most of the text in a file of code was supposed to be read by humans, not by machines. And that's really difficult if you're doing it just in code comments, right? It's not super ergonomic. With Jupyter, what you get is this interface that allows you to create this documentation and executable code in really, really flexible cells of content. And Google Cloud Platform has it available too. I don't think it's AI notebookless, so I think it's called Collaboratory. Yeah, that's right. So if you have there's a cloud-hosted version of it right here, and you can there's also a try it in your browser. There's a cloud-hosted version of Jupyter itself as well. Really, really powerful. By the way, Azure has these as well, specifically in Azure Sentinel to do threat hunting. Pretty rad. Now, the thing about Jupyter is that, as the PY might suggest, this came out of something called interactive Python, or IPython. And if you've ever watched me do like reverse engineering or any kind of like codey stuff, you'll often see me fire open an interactive Python prompt, because it's really, really easy to work with Python as a REPL, almost like a one line of code at a time shell. However, Jupyter kind of takes that to the absolute next level. And because that technology was so flexible, as the logo here might suggest, there are now kernels for Jupyter that are not Python. You can run Jupyter with a C# kernel, super, super cool. You can run it with a Clojure kernel if you're insane. JavaScript, Ruby, Erlang, Haskell, F#. There is even I don't think it's listed here for reasons, but there is also a PowerShell kernel for Jupyter. So if you wanted to, you could actually base it on on PowerShell. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you could. Now, Jupyter has gotten a lot of mileage in the data science field, and certainly the AI machine learning field as well. But it has a lot of value for security analysis, because think about what you would do in Splunk all day. You're doing a lot of statistical analysis. Being able to parse through data sets quickly with a tool like this, it really gives you a lot of power. So let's fire up Jupyter. I have it installed. It's really easy to install. It's literally just like pip install Jupyter Lab. That's all it is. And then just run Jupyter Lab. So let me fire that up. And I'm going to run it down here in this little window in case I need to do something else. Just run Jupyter Lab. Okay. Now it opens up in Firefox, which is not at all helpful. So I'm going to open it up here. I get a link to my lab instance. And now I'm in Jupyter. Okay, so what does this look like? Thank you. I'm glad you're appreciating the Blue Team content. So let's fire up a Python 3 IPy kernel just to see what this thing looks like. So here we are in a Python Jupyter notebook. By default, the first cell is a code cell. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and write some very simple Python code. We do print hello world. And then I did Control Enter, but the play button would also run the cell hello world. That's it. I do x equals 5. And then in the next cell, I could do print x. Works fine. Now, interestingly, if I put that up here, because I can rearrange the cells as you just saw, and I'll restart the kernel and run all cells, it will fail because this print x happens before the definition. So just be aware of that. There's some, it does honor, code order here. It's not all just saved in memory. Now, the next thing I want to show you is that you also have markdown cells. And let's say I wanted to get even fancier with it. So I have full markdown support in here. And let's import some libraries. Pandas for data analysis. Import from EBTX, I think. EBTX. The EBTX library is not designed super well, but import plotly.express SPX. Do I need anything else? Oh yeah. Import beautiful soup. Dang it. Do I not have beautiful soup installed? Yeah, I do. Is the library differently named? Beautiful Soup is a tool for parsing HTML and XML documents from BS4. I had it backwards. From BS4, import Beautiful Soup. Cool. Oh, nope. From. Awesome. There we go. Now we have everything that we need. Why is this cool? So what we can do with this is create a data frame, which is pandas concept, for parsing through this right here. Now to show you what we want to get, let's get the EVTX data first. So we have to do with, I always forget exactly how this works. EVTX dot E records equals E dot, I think it's records like this, and then records XML. What I have to do is export the XML from the EVTX record, because this is all binary format, right? So to get it, I'm going to say records equals beautiful soup. So I'm going to actually take the raw XML right inside this list comprehension. And parse it as LXML through beautiful soup. Oops, r dot XML for R in records. I probably got something wrong with that because I'm doing it from memory. Module object is not callable. Let me just load up Python EVTX. I think this is EVTX.EVTX. Ah, there it is. EVTX.EVTX. I think I have one more layer down to go in the EVTX calls. Yep, there we go. So now we're loading up these XML records, and I have to store them this way because of the way that the EVTX, it's a generator, basically, meaning that as soon as I'm finished with it, this record, the event container is exhausted. So if I want to save the data, I have to save it in this way, inside of this with block. But now that I have it, take a look at this. Records XML. Let's look at the first record. I have this really nice XML tree that I can look through, but it gets even better. Look at this. I can do event ID, and then I can get event ID.text. So now I have this incredible way to parse through my data. So if you, this gives me so much power. I'm not sure if it's detonating in your minds how effective this can be, but let's build out a data frame to hunt for this. I know that I gotta renew the time on the system, but I'm having fun with this. And it'll be cool to actually analyze all of these using Python. And you may find that because this thing kind of documents itself and you can reuse it, it might be more useful as a tool than, say, raw PowerShell logs. This is, by the way, this is not beginner stuff. I want to point that out there. This is a little bit next level. We're saying, first of all, you got to know Python to make this work, right? But also, you're using kind of higher level analytical tools to address a problem that a lot of analysts have or incident responders have. But once you have this ability, right, it's why I insist that every analyst and every blue teamer should get some Python under their belt because of what it gives you. All right, so we're going to create our data frame here, and we'll start off with just df equals pd.dataframe. And the reason we're going to do it this way So how would you use this in IRL? You'd export the logs off the system after the fact and then parse them from a system set up with Jupyter. Yes, that's exactly right. Or you could actually there are portable Python instances you can actually load on a flash drive, right? So if you had a real deeper situation, you could like have your Python set up, like ready to go, and you could plug it into a USB drive and get the event logs exactly where you needed them from and run it on the system. Or, and I think this is even cooler, there is also a project called Jupyter Hub, which is self-hosted Jupyter notebooks on your own server. So what you could do is you could set up a server in your SOC that allows you to run predefined notebooks with all of these procedures. It's just like, hey, give me the EVTX file. All this other stuff is pre-scripted. I will give you an event timeline. I will give you a statistical breakdown of all of the events in here. I will give you the anomalies. I will give you the standard deviation of whatever. Like, you can have these pre-scripted ready to go when you need to run them. Hell, you could even set it up. I should mention one other cool thing. From this Python notebook, look at this. I can run shell commands. And the shell commands actually can be saved as data. Hey, the Flet. So look, I've created this variable called files, and then I've set up the shell command ls. Now, if I ask for files, I have a list of files. Why is this cool? Imagine running this in a situation where I have like WinRM or WMI set up so that I could actually pull event logs directly off a system and then parse them using Python. I have some pen testing notebooks, by the way, that do things like this, where I have Nmap scripted to kick off from here. It's really like thread emulation, not pen testing, but set off to kick off Nmap scans to do port scanning, and then right from whatever it finds, it parses the Nmap XML for things that have SMB, for example, and then it'll run SMB client or SMB map against all of its findings. Then it will, anything that it can read write to, it has tests that it can run for that, and it's all scripted out right here in the Python notebook. And then what's awesome about this is that I have the code set up to do this, and then because it's generating reports and lists of findings as it goes, the attack literally writes the report for me, because it'll generate those visualizations and lists that leadership needs to see for all the findings. DF Solus, thank you for the follow. If you can't tell, I get super excited about Jupyter just because I think the possibilities, especially for onboarding new employees or people who are trying to learn this stuff, is so profound. If you give them a procedure like this is the SOP and the tool are the same thing. Okay, let's actually get this thing built though. df equals ed.dataframe. And a data frame, think of it like a spreadsheet in Python. So it's got rows and columns, and we can do cool stuff with it. And we get to load up all of the columns with lists of the same size. So we're going to start extracting data from the XML to put into our data frame. Now, just as a reference, I'm going to get this records XML. I'm going to get the 0th XML record up here just so I can see it and have some idea of what I need to get. So for example, I need to get the event ID, obviously. That's fine. So df, and this is how I define columns, is df event ID equals records XML. And we'll actually say r.eventid.text or r in records XML. So that's creating I'm doing a list comprehension. Dirks, thank you so much for the follow. I'm creating a list comprehension, right, that just creates a list of event ID texts out of my records XML, and I'm using the beautiful soup syntax to parse this down. That's one. Okay, next one, df, time created. Let's see where that is in the XML tree. Time created, right up there. Now, this I need to get at a little bit differently, because notice that, see how the event ID... Oh, actually, let me do record ID as well while we're in here. The record ID is like the index in the Sysmon database, basically, or the Windows event log database. So we're going to do event ID. We're going to do, what is it? Event record ID. So we'll just put in the word record there. All right, all good. And then I'm going to say, by the way, this is a pretty inefficient way of doing this. If I wanted to, I could write a function that created like a dictionary for each of the data frames that I cared about, and then just load that dictionary, the list of the small dicks into, I heard it too, into the pandas data frame. So this is a little inefficient, but for time and repetition, I want to show you how it works this way. Thank you, Grom. So for the time created, it's a little bit different, because you notice that in time created here, the time created is an attribute, which is a little bit funky. Whereas for the event ID, you can see that it's actually the value inside of the XML tag. So to get at that, I'm going to have to do that a little bit differently. Also, I actually want this to be real date time data, which is kind of annoying to do. So luckily, pandas makes that super easy. I can do pd.toDateTime, and we're going to do r.timeCreated.adders. Let me show you what I'm doing here. If I ask for the attributes of the time created, I get a dictionary back with system time in it. So that's how I'm trying to access that thing, right? .adders system time, which gives me back this UTC string, which the toDateTime method can convert into a date time. Okay, and then again, it's going to be for R in records XML. I want to do just a couple more, and then we'll move on. Now this is an event ID 3, so I'm going to care about if it has source IP, source port, things like that. I might care about those things. You know what? Just for starters, let's do this, and then we'll go back and do this a little bit more efficiently. That was fast. That was really, really fast. Okay, so let's take a look at df.head. So just look at the first 5 records in our data frame. All right, so they're all event ID 3, but you can see we got the time created. Now, this is where I get super excited. Let's start to learn a little bit more about our data set. Let's df.groupBy, and let's group by event ID. And we'll do .count. And let's also sort values by equals, and it doesn't really matter what you sort by when you're doing a count, because it's all just going to be individual counts. So let's just do sort by time created. It's the count of how many time createds you see. It's not the actual sort by time. And we'll sort by descending or ascending equals false. I know that's a lot, but what we're doing is we're taking all of the items in our data frame. we are grouping them by the event ID value, and then we're aggregating them by account. So basically, how many of each event ID do we have? Now, once we do that, the other columns are going to be meaningless because they're just going to be counts of values present in those fields. They're not going to be like actual values. So, and that's why these event records say it says 32 and 2. There are 2 of these. That's the whole point. So this essentially becomes like how many of the values are there. So if I sort by them by descending, I'm basically saying I want my events grouped by ID and show them to me in descending order of number of events per ID. That's the deal. So I have 738 network connections. I have 62, what is 13? That's registry, right? Yes, registry event value set. I have 32 process creations. I have 12 registry reads, I think. I have 2 11s and 2 22s. So I can then go get those. By the way, another thing that I should have done is very Splunk-like. df raw. I will save just the raw XML. Actually, I could just say equals records XML because it's a list of the same length. That way, if I ever need to extract more data, I kind of have it inside the raw if I need to. Really, really handy. Now I have that raw column. Now I could do some really cool stuff. But let's actually see what questions we're getting asked. Okay, so let's do this some more. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna write a function to make this extraction of data a little bit easier than what I have going on right now. So if I want to get more interesting XML data, I'm trying to think how I want to do this. I was just doing this yesterday and I totally blanked on exactly what I want to do. I basically want to be able to parse down. So like this source IP, this source host name, this source port, all this stuff, these data points only exist for event ID 3. So if I run this against, if I try to extract it from every event in the data frame or in the list, it'll fail. So I want to create a safety check, basically to say, like, return an empty string, if you're going to do it that way. Now, I could create tiny slices of the data frame for the different event IDs, but I don't actually want to do that, because I want, if there is a parent command line or something like that, I want to get it for everything. So I want to be able to do this kind of across the board. So we'll say... And the other thing that's really interesting is this data. Notice that each one of these is inside of the event data element. This makes it a little bit tricky to get at it. If you see that I do event data, right, I can do this. But then how do I get at specifically the source IP? Because if I do like .data, I get all of them. So what I actually have to do the beautiful soup object has this thing called select one, and I can actually give it basically a CSS selector. It's data name equals source IP. And that's how we get to it, right? Next. So what we're going to do is we're going to essentially write exactly that. We're going to write a safety function that says, you know, try return record. Let's say call it extract event data. Record.select one query dot text. And then accept key error. So if there's a key error on the thing, meaning that that doesn't exist, we'll return an empty string. This is just a really handy safety check where it'll return empty if it's not present, so I don't have to worry about it erroring out. This means that with this function, we'll just return data row by row to append to the data frame as opposed to extracting one column at a time. Will this return data row by row? So the way we're going to use this lasso is we're going to use it inside our list comprehensions. So yeah. What we're doing to build this up, and again, there's a more efficient way of doing this, but for now, this will work out okay. So if I want, say, destination IP, right? Let's say it's there. What we're going to do is we're going to say, take this record ID and modify it. We'll say source IP, and we're going to where's my function? Record dot event data dot select one. That's what I wanted. So we're going to, for the source IP, because we're extracting from event data, we're going to extract event data. We're going to send it the record itself, but then we're going to give it the query of data name equals source IP. Yeah, source IP, just like that. And now I'm able to extract that data safely without having to worry about XML that doesn't have that. Source port, same thing, right? And then we'll do dest port, it's destination port. And then for same thing for source IP, we'll do destination IP. And now this is for network event type 3, or Sysmon event type 3, which is a network event. But what about the command line stuff? That's the next thing that we really want out of there. So to do that, we are going to add some other command line stuff, because it's all in event data, right? Command line, and it should just be called command line. And by the way, if we want to see what one of these things looks like, let's clear the filter and look at an event ID 1 and see what an event ID 1 looks like. What? Oh, forget that. Let's just go. Why do I keep doing that? Go to PowerShell here. Let's get an ID1 here and send it to format list so you can see what this looks like. So we have the command line, right? We have the image, which is something we probably want. And we also probably, we do want the process ID. We also want the parent process ID and the parent image and the parent command line. So these are the other kind of note for registry stuff. There'd be other keys that we want, but for now, let's stick with this. So we're going to get process ID, command line, parent process ID, parent command line, just for now. And again, good call, infinite logins. Actually, so user is someplace. Oh no, it is. Yep, good call. We want user too, absolutely. Is it? It is just parent command line, right? Yep, love it. And we'll do image. It's a lot of copy pasta, right? I could have been more efficient with this too, but I think it's good to see this time and time again to get, you know, repetition is an important part of learning, and also just to see how exactly this works. Parent image. We want PID, which is what, process ID, like that, I think. Yes, and parent PID. And was there anything else on here? I feel like there was one other. Oh, you said user, of course. We got command line, PID. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, let's get user. And go. Dang it. None type. What'd I mess up? Source IP. Oh. Oh, interesting. Yeah, definitely finished writing the function. Let's test it though. Let's say right here. Records XML. Yeah, works fine. I'm getting a key error. None type has no. Oh, so if a record doesn't have. It's an attribute error. If it doesn't have any event data. Okay. I can't chain them like that. I have to have specific accepts. Fine. Now we've handled that. Come on. Oh, I just misspelled attribute. Thanks, Lasso. Hey, okay. So, let's take a look at what this data frame looks like now. Now let's look at just the event ID ones. Look, the process creations. To do that, we can use this really cool syntax. So df where df dot event ID equals 1, because it's a string, I think. We'll do head. And we have data. So that was laborious to get going, but now that we have it, we can parse through this thing swimmingly. So for example, let's do that group by again. Actually, I might have to fix up how Plotly works with Jupyter to make that work. I'll do that in a second. Yeah, parsing XML sucks, which is why I had Beautiful Soup do it for me. It turns out that Beautiful Soup uses LXML. Interestingly, the EVTX library has an LXML method that this event has, but it doesn't work nearly as well. And so parsing it through Beautiful Soup, I get this really easy searching syntax that I much prefer. All right, let's try this with just the table. df.groupby, command line, just to see what's noisy, right? This is really helpful to see, what you might want to filter out. .count, .sort values by equals event ID. Because again, remember, these are just counts of values. Ascending equals false. Oops. That should be parentheses. I don't know why I did those with squares. There we go. What? What? What is this? Shell.exe. Okay. Now, let's say I wanted to look at all PowerShell. I could say df where df parent command line, or let's just say command line. And .stir.contains, because the value inside the data frame has this stir section for helpful string methods, and we'll say contains PowerShell. Okay, now let's take a look at PowerShell, but let's just look at the command line and parent command line columns. So there's just the one. Do you know if there are public notebooks already built out that we could use? Probably. Actually, you know what? Hang on a second. That's what I was looking for. There is the Threat Hunter playbook. That's what I wanted. Yes. There's a ton of stuff here. You're quite welcome. I'll give you this Specdrops link as well. Now, I don't know if they specifically do Windows events with this one, but let's try to answer some of these questions. Oh yeah, so right, if we wanted to look for Metasploit, like lazy Metasploit, we could look for port 4444. So let's look for, it's just df, where destination port equals 4444. Again, because it's strings. I could have parsed them into an int, but I just didn't. Dest port, I think. I didn't say destination, did I? There we go. Nothing. What about source port? Well, let's see. I want to know more about that shell.exe. Okay. Now, you might notice that it's getting cut off a little bit here. This is funny, though. Look, you got image, download, shell.exe. There's your parent PID. There's your parent image, cmd.exe. Interesting. This looks like it was just run from the command prompt by the box, the try hack me room creator, to fire off the Metasploit shell. That's usually what this means. Especially when you see Explorer fire it up. But that's interesting, right? So this thing has a PID, so we can also look for anything that was a child of that. We could say df parent PID. Okay. So it didn't spawn any children, but notice that now if we just look for the PID for the 3660, we'll see not only will we see the event record ID that we saw, I think up here, yeah, 50574, which was the actual run of the command, but we'll also see the network connection, event ID 3. And now we have the source IP and the dest IP, and it was port 444. Very clever. Bad at hacking. Thank you so much for the follow. I bet not for long. So, I mean, look, this interface isn't for everybody. I have worked with pandas a lot, and so I've gotten pretty comfortable with this syntax. It does take some practice, like everything, but you know what, so does Splunk. Why not for long? Because you're here, my friend. Thanks for teeing that one up. And you're probably going to join the Discord. But what you get with this ability, and again, you know, once you write the notebook once, you can reuse it with any file. And we can start parsing this out however we want. Really, really powerful stuff. Okay. Let's get the Mimikatz file and start playing with this a little bit now that we have all this written out. Falcon0412, any suggestions to make sure your social media profile is secure? Sure. First of all, use different passwords for every single account. Use strong passwords for every single account. That's basic hygiene. Turn on multi-factor authentication for everything. Everything. wherever you can, do not use SMS multi-factor authentication. Use an app like Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator. I think LastPass has one as well. Use a password manager like LastPass to make it easier to generate unique, strong passwords for each of the sites that you want to use. And then finally, make sure that all of your privacy settings across your social media platforms are set to the maximal privacy that you're comfortable with. And yeah, Infinite Logins makes a great point. Review them often, those settings often, because vendors like to change them on you. Bitwarden FTW. Yeah, Bitwarden is fantastic. It's free and open source. If you really want to be next level about it, you can host your own Bitwarden server. Oh, you're welcome, Lasso. Thanks for hanging out. Have a good night. All right, yeah, let's hunt for Mimikatz here. Let's go get the Mimikatz EVTX and try to use our new notebook to do this thing. So what I'll do here is I will duplicate this notebook and rename it to Mimikatz. And then I'll shut down this kernel. And then shut down this kernel and then fire up this one. Hey Trisma, good to see you. Oh, I'm glad you like it. Yeah, I mean, look, I know that Hey Angel, good to see you too. I'm a giant dork for stuff like this. I really believe that data analysis tools like this can turn a SOC into a really next level organization, especially when you start getting into things like baselining with proper standard deviation, like understanding variance, things like that. Infinite Logins, by the way, when are you hosting another game of B&B? My bud, were you not in the Discord for the announcement? The answer is next Friday. Next Friday, we are doing another Backdoors and Breaches game. So drop in there. There's a pinned message. And yeah, if you want to play, just there's a pinned message with instructions. And if anybody wants to learn how to run a Backdoors and Breaches game, get in the Discord, send me a message. I will, because I'm planning on doing kind of like a training session for game runners. So if you want to run your own, there's some tips and tricks that I picked up doing this a lot for my team and for folks that might be helpful to you. Yeah, no worries. I know. Discord is just a distraction engine. I don't think it's actually super helpful for keeping on top of stuff. Yes, Angel, we're hunting from interpreter shells. Which, by the way, you can still use Metasploit if you know what you're doing with the payload. I was able to get a perfectly functional interpreter shell running with EDR enabled this week. Very, very, very handily with my friend Nim. Bad at hacking. B&B is Backdoors and Breaches, which I probably should make a shortcut for since we talk about it. Nuts. Yeah, I'm doing some Cobalt Strike as well. That's a totally different beast. Backdoors and Breaches, oh, I should have left that open, is a card-based simulator for incidents. So as the players, you take on the role of the blue team during an incident, and you have to use the tools at your disposal to discover how the attackers got in, how they pivoted, how they escalated, how they got away with the goods, and how they persisted. So really, really, really neat simulator for learning how a SOC or an incident response team does its job. And it's also just really, really fun. Lots of information for folks who are learning cybersecurity. So last month I ran a game on our Discord, just, open invitation, but you had to specifically say you wanted to play. And we're going to do that again this month, this Friday, trying to do one a month. And now that we've had some veterans do this, I'd like some new faces. Everyone's still welcome, but new faces to come in and participate and learn not just how the game is played, but how these processes work and the things that you might think about. What I'm going to do is I'm going to also try to kind of pregame the events so that they're relevant, like ripped from the headline. So it should be pretty cool. All right. So we're hunting Mimikatz. Let's go ahead and run these. Oh, that was wrong. I had to change the file name in here. Do hunting Mimikatz. The technical chat was awesome. Yeah. And what's cool was we had a mix of red teamers and blue teamers. So you got all these different perspectives about what was happening on a system and what the attacker might be interested in doing and where they might go from where we knew they were. Yeah, super, super valuable. All right, let's just confirm that we still have stuff. Love it. We do indeed. All right, let's redefine our extract event data. Yep, this is Python. And specifically, Falcon, we're looking at Python in a Jupyter notebook, right? So we have these cells of code that we can save and rerun, but also intersperse them with text, right? So this is a cell of text, but this is a cell of code, and we kind of can intersperse them. All right, so we know this works. We can delete this. Let's define our data frame. What? Oh, it's weird. How'd that get in there? Okay. Now, what are we supposed to be looking for? We're supposed to be looking for Mimikatz. So, detecting file creation. The first method of hunting for Mimikatz is just looking for files created with the name Mimikatz. Hey, Falcon, if you want to, it turns out that on my YouTube channel last year, I did a whole series on getting started with Python called Hack Summer. And you're very welcome to take a look at those and get started. It's a very gentle introduction to Python with a security flavor too. So you might want to check those out. Yeah, so we're just going to look for file creation. So let's just go with that, right? Look at file created. File created event is event ID 11. So let's look for any event ID 11. Now we didn't actually get file name. Oh, thank you, Falcon. I really appreciate the like, share, and subscribe. Infinite logins? No, but I appreciate the sentiment. I am a public employee, and I've spent my whole life working for nonprofits. So I'm just happy to have the skills and be able to pass them on. Is there something similar using volatility, except this is for Cobalt Strike? What are we looking at here? I mean, kind of. Angel, we're not looking at a memory dump. We're looking at Windows event logs. So, slightly different process. Now, by the way, we did not create a file name extraction. We should probably do that, right? So if we look at this here, target file name. Oh, this is the rule, right? So what we want to do is take a look at what an event ID 11 looks like in the raw and see exactly how that goes. But actually, before I do that, I'm going to do something else really, really quickly. I'm going to actually kill... Yeah, save this, and I'm going to kill Jupyter Lab, because I actually want to get the graphing system working. Have you covered how to make sure your application is securely developed? In some aspects, yeah. I don't think I've been able to fully cover that topic, but yes, we definitely talk about how to do things the right way in a lot of contexts. API secrets, what to add to your Git repository and what not to, things like that. How not to write. We actually did a cool stream 2 Wednesdays ago on web application programming, how to prevent cross-site scripting in a JavaScript app. So I want to get the Plotly library running because it's pretty. I have IPy widgets. Do I have to do something else? Jupyter Lab support. Jupyter Dash. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's fire that back up and see how we do here. Stop that. Weird. We'll still try this. Restart kernel and run all cells. Yes. Okay. Blueberry Dogs, thank you for the follow. Also, one cool thing about if possible, could you show development securing a simple API on your YouTube channel? Yeah, we can talk about creating APIs securely at some point. If you do a question mark, by the way, with any method, it'll give you the signature in the doc string in Jupyter. Super handy. So let's do df and then the x equals... Let's do event ID, just to see if I do a count by event ID. Oh, yes, it's working. Look at that, everybody. I can make pretty graphs very, very simply. This is where I think, you know, using Jupyter Notebook for stuff like this. But can I do it in Excel? Actually, I can. I know you're joking, Angel, but look at this. df to Excel. I can export my data frame to an Excel spreadsheet with one command, or to a CSV. So obviously I've got a lot of event ID 3s, and this really helps, you know, give you an idea of what the shape of your thing is. By the way, can I convert it to Markdown? Yes. A timeline is cool too. So one thing I might do is px.line x equals event ID, or actually x equals, did I do time created? Yep. Created. Y equals Yeah, I think that actually should just work. And then I think I can do a color equals event ID as well. Okay, that didn't work exactly how I wanted it to. But I can break down by event IDs over a timeline, which can be handy. I want the Y to be a count with event IDs. A graph like a speedometer? Like a radial graph? All right, so let's actually hunt for some stuff here. So we're looking for Mimikatz, but the first thing we need to do is look at event ID 11. So df event ID equals 11, and nope, wrong. So what I want is the raw here. And actually want just the first one. Values 0. I know that was like crazy to get to, but what we're doing is we're looking at specifically this event record ID. And I want the target file name. That's the name of the value I need to extract. Target file name. Oh, it's not 2 words. Okay. So we're going to rerun this data frame creation. I could have actually done that in a separate cell, but it's fast. Now that we have that, we can do some pretty cool stuff. So we could say file creates equals this slice of the data frame. Now we just have file creations. And so we could do something like df dot or file creates target file name if we wanted to see all of them. By the way, if you ever want to know how large a data frame is, you can do dot shape, and it'll tell you, okay, I've got 36 rows and 16 columns. So 36, that's enough to just look at. So I'm going to just get the target file name. And I can configure pandas to give me more space on this if I want to, which in many cases I'm going to want to. So to do that, I have to look it up. Yeah. Frequently used options: display max rows, display max columns. Where's my list of options? Oh, there it is. Max call width. That's what I want. PD.set option. We'll put that in a cell right here. We're going to set a display max call width. And we're going to set it to like 1,000 because I don't want it to mess anything up. Now we can see everything. Whether we want to or not. Right, it's wrapping a little bit, but... Oh, hey, look! Mimikatz.exe, right here. Handy. That's a little wide. Let's see if we can shrink that down and make it a little bit more readable. Nope. That's better. So we found mimikatz.exe right here. That's interesting. Right, so we can say... file creates where file creates target file name dot stir dot contains mimikatz if we're looking for file creations. Okay, so there are 3 of them. Look at the times, by the way. 39, 25. So these happened very close to, and this one was, 7 seconds prior. MMC, okay, and Explorer.exe. So Mimikatz was run, then the EVTX file was exported, and then the LNK was created. Interesting. And if I wanted to, right, if I want to see the mimikatz.exe, there is no parent PID, which is interesting. It was just kind of its own thing. And that's because it was a file create. It won't have a parent on there. But since I have the PID, I can go back to all of my data frame and say df process, or is it what PID dot stir dot, or just equals, and I find these events. So event 11 and 12. We know that 11 is a file create. What's an event 12? A registry event. Now, we have not pulled out the registry data yet. That's something else we'd have to add to our extraction. Could we make this smarter? Could it automatically grab the PID for our search and then include the PID related to our initial query? Yes, absolutely. We could script all of that out. If we wanted to. So let's talk that out. If we wanted to look for PIDs, right? So if we wanted to kind of look for all Mimikatz, if there was one. collected the file paths into a variable and searched for mimikatz. Should we have checked for the mimikatz in the loop that is collecting the paths and store only that information in the variable? Falcon, that's a really good question. You're saying, should we only look for mimikatz? No, in this case, because we don't want to start with the limit of the... We don't want to start by limiting our scope, right? It's like if we're looking at the sky, right? We're in an observatory. You don't start by zooming in to a single star, right? You have to orient yourself with the whole constellation, if not the whole sky. So you never want, when you're doing analysis like this, you never want to start zoomed in because you don't know what you might find. You want to start zoomed out and then do kind of wide queries at first and then zoom your way in once you've identified the things that are interesting. Now, if we knew, since we kind of are being guided through this handheld by the Try Hack Me room, yes, we could have started just for looking for Mimikatz stuff, but that's not actually what I want to do. This thing died. That's fine, though. I don't actually need to... All this other stuff is files, so I don't have to have it. Still running. So that's kind of the idea there. And we can use process access event IDs to hunt for abnormal LSAS behavior if LSAS is accessed by a process other than SVC host. So this could be clearer. Process access is what event? Event ID 10, process access. So the process access event reports when a process opens another process. Real valuable. What if they inject into SVC host and from there dump LSAS? I think that's what they're talking about. Or in the case of if they're talking about injection, Angel, right here, create remote thread. That's what you'd be looking for. So make it generic so that later we can get XYZ instead of mimikatz. That's right, Falcon. So basically what we're doing in this notebook is we're pulling in the EVTX, the exported Windows event files from Sysmon, and we're grabbing everything so that we can review to our heart's content. We don't know where the hunt's going to take us. So rather than starting focus, we're pulling everything and then doing specific queries off of that. Absolutely. All right, I think I am going to have to put this on GitHub. What I will do, this is my commitment. If this is what we'll do this Wednesday. We'll do it on stream. I'm gonna formalize this notebook and set it up as a GitHub repository for Windows event threat hunting. So we will do all the cool automations, we will do all the helper functions, and we'll do everything right so it's fast. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, there are some really cool things you can do with Jupyter where it's like, you can ask for widgets, or you can use widgets. Yeah, so you can actually create like a form to fill out in the notebook. I love this thing. Yeah, so for example, from widgets, import widgets. Is that right? What? Come on. Import IPy widgets as widgets. There we go. So Falcon, Wednesday, what's that going to be? That's going to be the 15th at 1700 Pacific time. So put that in your local time as you want it, 5 p.m. That's when we do our programming streams. And as much as I love doing the NIM stuff that we started, this is important. So we're gonna preempt the NIM stuff that we were doing and actually get this going and write this out as a project. But watch this. Now, so infinite logins, to your point, I could say like, find me events between these dates, right? I could get a start date, end date, because I've got a date picker widget right in my notebook here. I could even ask for event IDs. I could just have all of this automated. So like anytime I have an event log file exported, I can just send it right here. That's what I think we're gonna do. Because again, my idea here of using Jupyter Notebooks is that every good SOC should have standard operating procedures for everything that they do. However, there is often a gap between what the standard operating procedure does and what the tool actually looks like. What if the standard operating procedure was the tool? AMD Gonzalez, thank you so much for the follow and for the cheer. Really appreciate that. All right, so we found some Mimikatz. Hunting abnormal LSAS behavior, right? So we're looking for process access for LSAS. Oh, we're supposed to access this completely different file to view an attack using an obfuscated version of Mimikatz. So they're saying, okay, this is what an obfuscated Mimikatz attack looks like. Where, yes, obviously Mimikatz is in there. It's accessing NTDLL. By the way, like, anything, I should just call this out. If you see a process outside of Windows System 32 that is accessing ntdll.dll, pull the fire alarm. That should not be happening. NTDLL is about as low level as it gets. Jay Beers, thank you for the follow. And what that's doing, right, is trying to get around using the Windows APIs that Defender is watching, and other things to do what it needs to do to get an LSAS and do the process injection and all the cool stuff Mimikatz is doing. So, again, nothing in downloads should be accessing NTDLL. That should be a straight up detection in whatever sim you're using. Okay. That was a fun one. We'll do one more, and we'll get out of here. Let's look at some rats. I really want to show, so this is cool because a rat is going to have network traffic, and I love me some network traffic. You give me NetFlow, you give me a packet capture, and I'm gonna own you as an attacker, especially with Jupyter, because I can parse down and I can really see like what's normal, what's not, and I can look at it over time. So if you make any spike, anything at all that varies from the baseline, I'm gonna catch you. All right, let's shut down these kernels. And let's duplicate this one and turn it into rats. Falcon, I am not Neo. I've just been doing this for a long time. And by this, I don't even mean like InfoSec I've only been doing for a couple of years. I've just been doing system administration and programming for, about a decade or more. And I've picked up some parlor tricks along the way that are really, really handy. But here's the thing. All of the stuff that you see here is very learnable. And it's nothing that I was taught in a school. This is all self-taught, which means that you can do it too. Do I do consulting? I used to. Yeah, I used to have my own business, but I now work for a specific organization, and this is like my version of consulting. This is how I tend to spend my non-work time. Because the truth is, I'm a teacher. That's what I started my career doing. My company used to be called TTS, Tag Your Technology Services. It no longer exists, but yeah. What do I do with the business? So the business was providing IT consulting and focusing on security, but also like cloud deployment solutions for my target was specifically schools and nonprofits. That was my market, and because I knew it, right? Hello there. Good to see you. Yeah, and it was cool. I helped a lot of folks. Did a lot of like training for faculties, like learning how to use services like Google Classroom correctly, or how to secure an environment with students in it. It's fun times, but it was very transitional. And then when I got the current opportunity that I have now, I was like, okay, this is going to make more sense. And so kind of moved on from that. Because I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I don't want to grow up, but like, I don't know. I just love all this stuff. Be interested in occasional 1099? Maybe. I have to like let's talk off stream. I have to be somewhat careful with the side hustles that I take on, because of the terms of working for the state of California. Working for a government is a little tricky. But yeah. Okay, so we've got this. We've got the right file here. What are we looking for? We're looking for rats. So we want to look for network data. This is going to be fun. I'm like kind of rubbish at some CTFs. The thing that I'm trying to work on and like get much better at is binary exploitation, just because I'm fascinated by it. I am doing Flare-On this weekend though. I'm gonna bang my head against the wall for Flare-On. And for those of you who don't know, Flare-On is a Mandiant provided challenge that is starting this weekend. Really, really cool. And much to my surprise, the first challenge is JavaScript in nature. So hang out in the Discord, and we'll talk about Flare-On this weekend if you want to. It's not team-based, but yeah, I'm excited. Are certifications any good? Yes, they are. You got to pick the right ones, but certifications, they are beneficial for one, forcing you to learn the like nuts and bolts technical information if you're not coming from a long IT background. That's one. And two, look, the reality is that if you're looking to get a job in tech or in information security, having those certifications gets you past a lot of those first filters for hiring managers. I hate that it's the way the game is played, but it is the way the game is played. What are your favorite hands-on SOC analyst type certs? Boy, there aren't a lot of them. I think the BTLO, the Blue Team Level 1, is really, really... I mean, yeah, I think that certs can do both. Yes, you can, because you can grow your skills without the certification, but the certification proves that you have it. But then proves it to whom? The answer is the people that need the proof. So the BTLO, there's a certification you can get from here, the Blue Team Labs Level 1, which is really, really solid. The other one, which is actually one that I'm going for like later this month, is the one of the eLearn security certs. They have a lot of great material for Blue Team as well as Red Team. So they have CRE is that MAPT, is that the one I'm thinking of? And then the THP. So the CIR is Certified Incident Responder. So if you want to be the person who comes in when things have gone bad, this is what you want to look for. Really, really teaches you the practicalities of how to deal with an incident response, right? You're going to learn packet traffic analysis, Wireshark, Elk and Splunk, SIM searches, cool stuff like that. Certified Reverse Engineer, if you want to do that, that's very, very exciting. Oh, that's mobile. That's my bad. That's a pen testing cert. This, to me, though, is the granddaddy of the Blue Team certs. And it's the one that I'm going to be going for later this month. I've been studying for a while for this one. CompTIA Security Plus or CSA is right to Blue Team. Oh, I should have mentioned, yes. So CompTIA has some great ones. So Sec Plus is a great first certification. I really do believe that. But the next one after the Sec Plus would be the CISA, if you want to think about being a SOC analyst. The Cybersecurity Analyst certification is very, very, very good. Again, but it's multiple choice, right? It's not a practical exam. Incident response, wouldn't they do physical investigation instead of SIM Splunk? It depends on whether they can, Angel. A lot of times they can't. And honestly, it depends on the tools you have. So for example, a lot of times we do incident response, and yeah, it is. It's looking at EDR logs. It's looking at SIM logs to correlate data. And then like the security team will maybe isolate, but then it will be maybe the desktop support team's job to, you know, grab the machine and reimage. It depends on the type of incident. Yeah. Yeah, so the CISA is a really good one for getting your feet wet with analysis, but I lean towards the eLearn security certs because it's all practical, right? You actually have to perform tasks, not just answer questions. And look at this list of stuff that you're going to be doing. Network traffic analysis, enrich with threat intel, which we could speak more about on this stream. Data correlation, super important. There's my buddy Redline. IOC-based threat hunting, i.e. YARA rules. Memory analysis and forensics, which is what I really got to get better at. Windows Linux event analysis, which is what we're doing right now. Log analysis, and detection of any stage of the cyber kill chain. Yeah. This is the real deal, and it is hard. But yeah, I think this is, from what I've seen, this is the best Blue Team cert out there. Because it pulls in just so much. Alright, let's look for rats. Yeah, infinite logins. If you get better at the Blue Team stuff, you're going to become so much harder to find. Oh man. Okay, so actually I don't want file creates. I want network events. So let's do those. Equals df event ID equals 3. There's so much to learn. So we had a thing when I was a teacher that, you know, we would often kind of call people and saying, oh, I'm bad at math. No, no, no. There's no such thing as bad at math. It means you're still learning. It's okay to still be learning. It's always okay to still be learning. And as a matter of fact, I think it's important to still be learning. It's very easy, especially when you're getting started in this field, to always feel some anxiety like, I don't know enough, I don't know enough, I have to do this thing, I have to do that thing, I have to do all the things. Try to take a moment and let that anxiety pass you by and focus on the fact that you are at a feast of knowledge to gain. There's so much available to you, and it's never been easier to access. I truly believe, this is about as religious as I get, but I truly believe that being a conscious human being means that you are morally obligated to grow as a person throughout your life. And so learning, obtaining knowledge and skills is part of that. Consequently, it is not just obligatory to learn new things, but it is a blessing to do so. You grow as a person with every new thing that you bring into yourself. So that's why I do what I do, not just the learning of this information, but the sharing it with you, because I want to help other people grow in that way. All right, let's take a look at the IP addresses here. Let's look for group by destination IP. Sort values, and actually, you know what? Let's do a chart of them, because we can do that. Px dot bar, and we'll not bar, yeah, events, and the x is going to be the dest IP. So good. It's so good. So look at this. I mean, if you know that you're in this internal environment, right? Obviously, we might know what this IP address is. We might know what this is. But then look, we've got these 3 other IPs. Like, what is going on here? And now all of a sudden, with this really easy bar chart, now we have a place to start hunting. Yep. Thanks, Infologs, and thanks for hanging out. And now we can start hunting down these. I would, take some of these. I could also have done a group by, because there are so few of them. I could do network events dot group by dest IP. And now I can do stuff like, what is this? And I could maybe send that to virus total. Right, that one looked okay. What about this 23? And by the way, we could also automate this inside the notebook if we wanted to. All right, no detections on virus total, but now we might be able to take a look at other traffic or even what the process ID was. So and even in the bar, if I wanted to, I could say color equals image. So freaking good. Now, by breaking down the IP address traffic by process, by image, I can say, okay, well, these IP addresses were going from this color, right? So service host was talking to this, smart screen was talking to this, service host was also talking here, but then big bad rat.exe was talking to 10.13.4.34. Now I have this as an artifact to look for. Yeah, it would be good to have a baseline. And for that, we can do px.line events, x equals time created, and then color equals there's your baseline. So we see these spikes in. Oh wait, no, that's not how I want it. I want to count. It's kind of annoying. Do I want to do like count dest IP? Does this work? No. I know there's a way to do that. I just can't remember what it is now. But yeah. All right. So yeah, obviously we found the rat. I think we're gonna call it there. I know we have these persistence and evasions, but we're gonna play with this a little bit next time, and then get on to some other stuff. So for now, I think we're gonna say goodbye. I'm going to provide you the hack list here, and we're gonna see if anybody on the hack list is streaming right now. But also, hey, if you like what you're seeing here, and you wouldn't mind a follow if you haven't already, I'd appreciate it. Join the Discord. And hey, if you can afford it, maybe a subscription. I love giving away this information. I love doing this. But you know, especially for some of the stuff I want to do next, like creating cloud labs, things like that, there will be some costs associated. So, you know, if you like what you're seeing, a thank you would be appreciated. Ginger Root Orbital, thank you so much for the subs. That is incredibly generous of you. Thank you so much. To Stack Attack and Verhaken Live. All right. Oh, optional is running, so let's do that. We'll send you all to optional. All right. Well, friends, thank you so much for hanging out. I hope you had a good time. I'll be back on Tuesday with some red team material. Thank you for the follow. So until next time, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and I will see you next time.